Number one, define what kind of agnostic you are. Are you an atheistic agnostic? Or are you a theistic agnostic?
It sounds to me like you're trying to limit me to those two categories, and I don't like either one of them. Atheistic or theistic agnostic, these sound like people that sort of have an opinion on the subject, but they're not really sure about them, and that's not what agnosticism means to me. To me, being agnostic means I don't know. I have no opinion. Period.
Number two, do you believe that it is impossible to prove or disprove a God? And if so, how do you know if it's possible or impossible to disprove or prove a God?
I assume you're talking about empirical proof, which is what most people would mean. That kind of proof requires the ability to observe what it is you're talking about. For example, if you've got a locked box and no way to make any observation of what's going on inside of it, then you have no basis for constructing any kind of empirical proof about what may or may not be going on inside there. If you are talking about something else like an ontological proof, then I would just a priori classify that as bullshit. Anyway, the universe is a locked box to some extent. Not completely. There's been some observations made over the last few centuries. But if you want to talk about proving or ruling out the possibility of God, that would require you to make some pretty comprehensive observations of the entire universe, the complete set of the physical laws, and the underlying mechanisms implementing those laws. You'd need at least that much information. Maybe you'd need more than that. Because if you don't have that, then you have to admit that you are ultimately ignorant of what is really going on at the most basic level. And you have to admit that anything is possible at that level. Which means there could be a God, or maybe there isn't. You don't know. Anyway, modern science has not provided us with anything like that level of knowledge about the universe. The nature of consciousness is a complete mystery. The ultimate origin of the universe is completely unknown. And so on. The universe at its ultimate level of organization is a locked box to the human race. As far as I know. If you happen to know where the information I'm talking about happens to be laying around somewhere, you feel free to let us in on that.
Number three, define what a God is.
There's a common conception of what a God is amongst the people that have these kind of debates. Usually they're talking about the Christian God. Fundamentally, I guess they just mean the supposed God that created the universe, that supposedly created us, and supposedly has some purpose for these weird activities. I think that common definition is good enough for the purpose of this discussion.
Number four, define the supernatural abilities of a deity, such as all-powerful, all-knowing, and etc.
How would I know? I'm an agnostic. I don't even know if the guy exists or not. She asked me what kind of car he drives. I'd fall back on the common definition again. Omniscience, omnipotence. That's the common idea of God. That's good enough, isn't it?
Number five, if you had the ability to remove one religion, such as Christianity, Islam religion, Judaism, etc., what would it be?
I doubt it would be a good idea to get rid of any of them. The world's a complicated place. And I don't mean it's complicated in the sense that there's underlying principles that govern the way things work and you just don't know the underlying principles. I mean the situation is at least that bad, but it may be worse than that. There may not be any underlying principle. In fact, that's the way I think it is. There's probably none at all. There's just an ocean of tiny details. The overall outcome being nothing more than the sum of their individual actions. That's the way the weather works. That's why your weatherman can't tell you what it's going to do a week from now with any accuracy. It's not that he's missing knowledge of some underlying principles that would allow them to make those predictions. It's that there are no underlying principles that would allow them to make those predictions. What he's able to predict is dependent entirely on the number and distribution of the observations he's able to make and the computational power he has available to him to model the system. That's the best he can do. I'm pretty sure the worldwide social situation is even worse. It's nowhere being near to even possible to even model the behavior of a single individual, let alone the behavior of millions of people. There are times when most people do agree on what ought to be done, but barring the supposition of some immediate concern that would apparently demand such a drastic measure as that, I don't think it's a real good idea.
Number 6. If you were a god, can you give me 3 good reasons why you would allow children to suffer and die?
You can imagine as many specific reasons under specific circumstances as you like. Whether these reasons actually exist or these deaths are simply random acts in a meaningless universe is, of course, again, impossible to know. It sounds like you're asking for a set of general principles that makes it okay to kill children. But like I said before, the world doesn't necessarily operate on the basis of general principles. Also, in the absence of any real information on the ultimate nature of the universe and our place in it, we have no real way, ultimately, of evaluating the significance of these deaths. They may be horrible, random, and meaningless, or they may be part of a larger plan we don't know about. There's no way to tell. I wouldn't worry about it too much. You'll be dead eventually, too. Then you can ask in person, if you feel like it.
Number 7. What would be a good reason to hide from the human eye? Such as keeping yourself concealed so people can't prove or disprove your existence. Can you give me a reason?
Well, the reason most of these Christian people would give you is that it's got to do with free will. It's because this God of theirs doesn't want us to be a bunch of automatons. He wants us to decide things for ourselves. Therefore, he stays out of our sight, so that we can make up our own minds. That would be as good a reason as any, I suppose. Although, again, of course, you could probably make up as many as you like. It could be any reason, or no reason. You have no way to know.
Number 8. Do you feel like it's reasonable for a God to kill himself to save you from himself?
Sure, why not? I mean, if he's already decided that he doesn't want to force you to do what he wants, that he wants you to decide for yourself to do what he wants, then he's reduced to acts of persuasion, which is what the whole Christ thing amounts to. I mean, if you assume that this Christian God exists, then yeah, these are the rules he's decided he's going to play by, according to them. And it's his game, you know. It's not like he owes you anything if he exists. I mean, it's his rules. That's all there is to it. I mean, you want fair? Fine, take the guy to court. Do whatever you feel like you got to do. Except he may not exist in the first place, so I don't see the point, you know? What are you complaining about?
Number 9. If today we were to prove that there was in fact a God, but it offered no heaven and no hell, what good or value would you have for that God then?
Well, that could very well be the case. He could be like Buddha, and we're just out here trying to escape the wheel of existence and stop existing altogether. And I guess you could complain about that too if you wanted to. I don't know, it wouldn't be so bad. I could think of worse things. You can imagine any kind of God you want. A God that doesn't care if we live or die. A God that thinks we taste great on toast. The only point that matters here is that we don't know what he's like or if he exists in the first place. That's what this discussion is supposed to be about. I guess what you're doing here is questioning the value of the teachings of organized religion, given the supposed existence of a God who is basically apathetic, blind, idiot. Yeah, I mean, I think you're asking, you know, what good is Christianity if God doesn't care about us, and so on or whatever. Is that it? I don't know that it matters much. I'm not a huge fan of religion. I don't go to church. On the other hand, I liked The Lord of the Rings. It's a great book. I hated the fucking movie. But I seriously couldn't care less that none of that stuff actually exists. Still a pretty good book. I'm sure you could say as much for the Bible if you were into it. Hell, it took 1,000 years to write. Some of it's been around longer than most of other written history. So I suspect it must have some kind of literary value, if nothing else. What more else does it need? If God exists or doesn't care, I don't think it matters. Not to me anyway. It might to these Christian folks. But again, it's entirely an academic point because you don't know. No way to know. Not at this point anyway.